All right, everyone, what's up? Arid Lord is back for another Walking Dead vlog. This is the aftermath for the ones who live, discussing really the series overall to kind of discover if is the show satisfying or is the ending not as satisfying as we thought, but then also to just kind of go over the show as a whole. It has been 6 years of build up for Rick and Michonne to come back. I mean, more so Rick. Um, and yeah, just to kind of give a comprehensive overview of everything and also the future. There's been a lot of talk online of will this person come back, or will there be more Rick and Michonne stories? What's the future of the series given the state of the CRM? A lot of different stuff. I am also joined in this vlog by past cooperative podcaster Jeff from the Walking Dead World on Twitter. If you follow along for live reaction tweeting content for all Walking Dead shows. I think we even covered Fear the Walking Dead, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I sure did since day one.
That must have been. Hey, listen, there were pieces of Fear the Walking. It was such a mixed bag. Like, I really enjoyed season one when everything was falling apart in society. I wish the show had just been civilization falling apart. And then I got interested again when Morgan came in. And then I saw there was a CRM episode, so I watched that one. I'm like, oh, it was only one off episode. Um, and then I watched the end of Morgan's story, and so I was all over the place. I haven't really watched the totality of Fear the Walking Dead, but I kind of jumped around a lot. So, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the ones who live, the limited 6 episode series. And when we went into this, it was pitched as a limited run, and I remember all of the marketing was like, "This is a limited series." Even the interviews with Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrera, Scott Gimple, they kept saying, "This is a limited series." For the Daryl Carroll and the Negan Maggie shows, that was not the case, and we now know that those shows are getting a second season. So, I guess overall, I'll pose the question first to you, Jeff. Were you overall satisfied with the ones who live, just from the bird's eye view?
Yeah, so I think now that a few days have passed and it's kind of been enough time to kind of look at the whole series, I would say that I'm pretty much like 90% satisfied. There's some things that the show didn't do that I would have liked them to do. There's some things that I really, really, really loved. But I'd say I'm overall satisfied in like the conclusion of Rick's story and the conclusion of Michonne's story. I feel like a lot of it was rushed just because it was only 6 episodes and there was some stuff they just straight up could not get around to. And there were just some limitations in the story because of what they've done with the other shows. But I would say that I'm about 90% satisfied with the whole show. That might change, as the years go on and we get more um and as time passes, but I really am satisfied with how it
Hmm.
all wrapped up. And
Is the satisfaction from because I guess is the satisfaction from how Rick and Michonne's story ended? Because when I did my episode 6 review, when I talked about the finale, I talked about how I was really happy where Rick and Michonne, their characters, landed at the end of this. The fact that we had waited for so long, a lot of people were like, "Oh, a reunion would be so nice. Imagine if there was a reunion." And the fact that we got a reunion that was very emotional and very heartfelt, I loved it. It was kind of a swerve because The Walking Dead doesn't typically give us happy endings, and the fact that we did get a happy ending was a very nice surprise. And just all of the pain and stress, especially that first episode, Rick. Like, the first episode might be my favorite. Like, just it sells us and Andrew Lincoln's acting on the fact that this man is just at the end of his ropes. I mean, it sells us on the fact that he has really been stuck here for 6 years because so many people were like, why wouldn't Rick come back to Alexandria in 6 years? Like, how is it possible he's been gone for this long? And I felt that was one thing the series succeeded in, convincing us that he truly cannot get away from this totalitarian group this entity. I mean, the fact that he had 4 escape attempts, one of which he chopped his hand off. It's like, gee, like how are you going to convince us that he really can't get away? Oh, he's going to friggin', chop off his hand. And I know he's been gunning for that forever. He's been pesting the series creators like, they did it in the comic, let's do it. And so they didn't let him do it in the main show, and they finally let him do it for his kind of I guess, quote unquote, last hurrah. But I was overall satisfied with the way Rick and Michonne landed, how they ended. What I wasn't satisfied with was the CRM portion of it. The fact that they were this, almost this mini-series villain that was explored somewhat, and then systematically, with like a Thanos snap of the fingers, literally that explosion that took all those soldiers at the Echelon briefing, and it just seemed sudden. Like, what were your thoughts on that conclusion to the CRM?
Yeah, I think the thing I was most satisfied was that Rick and Michonne were able to get away and obviously get home and get back to their kids and find each other. I would have liked more of like the kind of evil side of the CRM to be explored, because it kind of felt like throughout the whole franchise we only like saw bits and pieces of it, and even in this show we only saw like bits and pieces of just how crazy they were and how like evil they were. And then, like you said, it was just kind of like in a sudden explosion, it was all over, and then the show's over. So I would have liked, I think honestly, a whole like I would have watched a whole show just about the inner workings of the CRM and how they kind of like came to be and the things that they did, not even including Rick and Michonne's part in their story. Um, so I was disappointed that that came to an end so quickly, but I also think it opens up an interesting um, like direction for the story now that we know a lot more about the CRM. We know that it still does exist in some form, and it's kind of been revolutionized. So they could explore that in the future, and kind of like the power vacuum that opens up once like Major General Beale's gone, the whole frontliner force is gone. So I think that's an interesting story direction they could go in if they do choose to go in that direction. And plus, what was kind of revealed that they had spies in all of the major communities pretty much around the world. So that could be kind of a villainous like thread that could be explored, even though the CRM is kind of good now. Um, but overall, I was satisfied with it wrapping up, and I knew I had a feeling that it was going to be wrapped up in these 6 episodes. It's just seeing the explosion, and then 2 minutes later we see them reuniting with the kids. That was really jarring. I could have done with more episodes in this season to kind of unpack everything.
Well, you had that clip where they're accomplishing two things at once, where there's the voiceover. That voiceover could have been an entire episode, because there are
Right.
technically scenes that we didn't see. Right after Rick and Michonne destroy all the frontliners and kill Pearl Thorne and everyone's dead, at that briefing, they have to then go back to the CR government, tell them what they did, like figure out like who's gonna have over. Like now there's the CR wants to have oversight, and I guess I had watched, because you were saying like a series that just focuses on the CRM and all that. I guess World Beyond was that series, and as I'm watching these 6 limited episodes, I'm realizing it's actually kind of important to watch World Beyond, because if you were like, hey, like I didn't get enough of the CRM and their what they do and blah, like those first, very much so the second season of
Right.
World Beyond really dives deep, because you get to see, and they flash to a couple of the scenes, like Beale's like, we were providing test subjects, and it jumps to the scene where they're experimenting, and those are all the A's that they capture. And then there's the scene Omaha is referenced, like Rick sees it on the TV with Dorn, and in the first season we see that lieutenant at Omaha like putting down walkers. There's the scene where they blow open the walls and lead the horde. Like we actually see them committing the genocide. So like it gives like some very rich backstory, and like looking back, I'm glad they did it. I guess the focus on the kids was, maybe a little questionable, but
Yeah.
like overall, I enjoyed that very much so. But and I said this in my episode 6 review. The thing I'm concerned, and so the thing I'm concerned about is just how you continue the universe moving forward. Because in an interview, Gimple was recently interviewed because the ratings for episode 1 did very well. And so I don't know if it was comicbook.com, some interview site basically was like, wow, like there's a lot of series that fall victim to fatigue, like what's going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Star Wars Cinematic Universe, where it's like, okay, we know the story. We know the story that ended with Tony Stark in the Infinity War Marvel story, or we know the story of Darth Vader in the Star Wars. Like there's the classic stories within those universes, but you just keep milking whichever characters or subsections endlessly, and it just fatigues the audience, and the views are reflective of that. However, in Gipple's case, he can come back with these two classic characters and break the mold wide open, and there's this huge explosion of viewers and viewership into this series. And the guy was like, how do you keep that running? And he's like, oh, you have to have engaged stories and keep people in the universe and so on and so forth. But I'm thinking to myself, this is like short lived, right? Because this is effectively, and I'll get your opinion on this, like this is the end of Rick and Michonne's story. Like I know in interviews they've been coy about like, oh, we'll see, I'm not sure. Like he had the quote where he's like, I'd love to breathe the same air as Daryl and Negan again. It would be cool to reunite with the characters in the other spin-offs. But like, let's be real, that closing shot of them all hugging with the CRM helicopters flying over ferrying supplies, that is the most and they all lived happily ever after you could possibly get. Like I don't feel like there's any more to tell. And that's the thing that I'm conflicted about. And and this is the question I pose to you, like where do you see the universe going? Like we have the variant stuff in France with Daryl. Negan's story, I mean, it's kind of like the Saviors 2.0 with the woman from Ozark and the Croat. Like, I'm not really sure where that story goes, to be quite honest. And those are the only two we know of. And Fear the Walking Dead's done. The original show's done. Now the Rick show is done. You know, and so I don't know if there's plans for more, but I haven't heard of anything. But where do you see the series going? Because the CRM was this, they kept expanding wider and wider and wider. You had the Saviors that were big, and the Whisperers were pretty big, and the Commonwealth was really big, and then you get the CRM, which is the biggest. Portland, Omaha, like Philly, their helicopter force, their frontliners, that speech that Beale said, I was like, this is like, these guys can do damage on the biggest scale we've ever seen. Not only do we not get to see it, it's just concluded. So the potential of that is neutered, and we never get to see like what can go beyond that, and have you kind of cut yourself off at the knees because there's no potential to explore that storyline anymore. So what are your thoughts on continuing the Walking Dead universe? Like how do they do it?
Yeah, I really liked what you said about like that final shot kind of being like the official end. Like we had the ending of the main show and that closed the story for most of the characters. But this was truly the end of the show in my opinion because it was the end of Rick and Michonne. I have a feeling, if they wanted to pop up, if they felt it was right and wanted to do like a little cameo or something later down the line, I could see that happening. But this felt like end of the book. This felt like a conclusive end. Um, so now I'm kind of like you. I'm like, how do they move forward? Like, I'm obviously interested in seeing what's to come with Daryl, what's to come with Dead City, but this specific story was the one that everyone's been waiting for so long. I've been, thinking about it since Rick left, how it would play out. So it's kind of like a almost deflated feeling about the future of the franchise in a weird way. But it's also, in my opinion, it's a good thing because I think endings like this don't happen enough in big franchises. Like we don't get conclusive endings in a lot of stuff because they obviously want to continue it for sake of ratings and just getting more out of it. So I'm glad we got like a conclusive ending. And then, I think it was Gimple that said something along the lines of wanting to get back to the basics of what The Walking Dead is for the future. Um, just that kind of, you know, really zoned in storytelling about a small group of people, which is what the show started out as. Because lately, all the shows have been really, really big with these huge groups and these crazy alliances and dynamics and all over the world. So I would really like to see something just like a really small group of survivors out in the middle of the out of in the wilderness, basically, not in a community, just kind of just trying to make it. And I think it would be smart for the franchise to maybe not rely so heavily on established characters and to really kind of try something new with original characters, because you can only tell the same story with these established characters so many times before people kind of get sick of it. Um, and I just think it's after 14 years, it's time to kind of do something so completely disconnected and try that. They tried it with Fear, they tried it with World Beyond, but they ultimately had those really crossover heavy in the later seasons. So I would like to see something like brand new, fresh, instead of constantly trying to extend the life of these iconic characters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's the best course.
I guess it's just a matter of like, do people want to, will the ratings reflect that, right? Because I think, in a way, I feel like Tales of the Walking Dead was kind of an experiment to see
Yeah,
that. And which episode got the most viewership out of that? The one that was focused on Alpha's backstory. Like,
yeah,
like, so it's kind of like, like people like the iconic characters, and Alpha was, one of the best villains. And
right.
and so seeing her more of her backstory was pretty appealing. So I like, if the viewership went along, like, I'd be cool with that. And I think I'm hesitant because Fear the Walking Dead was that kind of experiment.
Right,
Brand new group of survivors, not related to the comics at all, and it was going to be society falling apart. And then quickly it became like, by the end of the first season, it's like, oh, the world's already fallen apart. Here's The
right.
Walking Dead 2.0, and I'm like, well, like, I'm kind of already watching a story with a group of survivors, and there are some things Beale said in the Echelon briefing. The biggest one to me, like the fact that he thinks that in 14 years that like everyone's gonna be dead from like the massive zombie herds of like millions of zombies. I'm like, what the hell? Like, like
Yeah,
that's, yeah.
that
First of
was
all,
pretty.
where are those hordes? Is my question. Where are they? I mean, I'm sure Rick took the pictures with him that he got from Beale,
Right.
because I feel like that's going to be like the next threat. Like, when
Yeah.
Rick goes back to the Commonwealth and working with the new CR government. Which, by the way, good catch. I did not catch on the. I saw this on your channel, on your Twitter account. The choppers now have just a circle. It's no longer the
Right.
three circles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge. Like, I didn't notice that on first viewing,
I
and
didn't either.
yeah,
I didn't. Yeah. And that feels like it's kind of they're kind of moving away from those three circles, which kind of honestly for everyone that lived in all of those communities is probably a really negative symbol now. It's associated with like genocide and just the mass killing of all these people and manipulation. So they're kind of switching to a whole new like outlook on life with just one circle. I don't know what this one circle represents. I guess it's just the main city now. Um, but I think with that there's potential to kind of, if they wanted to do something in the future with not necessarily Rick and Michonne, but if they wanted a character from the Commonwealth or someone that we do know that is, at least somewhat related. I could even see like a Eugene type story where he works with someone to figure out the threat with these mega herds that are roaming. Um, Maybe he works with someone in the Civic Republic to come up with a solution for that. I think that could be really interesting because that felt very purposeful with them kind of showing us the pictures of the megaherds and letting us know that this is a huge threat. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
that kind of felt like they were setting something up with that, at
And
least some.
General Beale's solution was to like, yeah, let's not unite the living people on this continent. Let's kill more of them off and
Right.
gas
Yeah.
Portland. I was like, how does? Because when he's fighting Rick, he's like, I'm trying to make sure that we don't die, and it's like, but like, yeah, by like killing like your other like a part of your life, you've already destroyed one
Right.
one entity in Omaha. Yeah, it's like what? Why? I don't get that logic. Like I understand wanting to be the supreme force where they're just gonna storm across the country and just be in control, but like, aren't you gonna like severely limit and like I'd be in, like would they just like gas and bomb Commonwealth if they were to attack them like I because he even said to Rick like your loved ones will be spared from our march like whenever we'd find them like because he's saying like eventually we will tear through the continent, it's just a matter of time, and I guess that explains why they haven't found Alexandria yet. Their priority was secrecy until they could pull off this plan, so they wanted to pick off Omaha in a way that didn't alert the CR, pick off Portland in a way that didn't alert the CR, and then the CRs left, and then they just martial law the CR, and then they do whatever they want. That was
Right.
that, and then they take over the continent and any survivors that are on it. So I guess that because it was like, well, they've had such a supreme force this whole time. When even going back to Rick's war with Negan, when Jadis was still trading people to the CR, but I guess that makes sense. They wanted to be secret until their force was big enough. So
And I think part of it had to do with like getting the resources. If they take out Omaha, they take out Portland, they can get all of the resources that those communities had, whether it be fuel or food or vehicles, weapons, all that from within those communities. It's all theirs. It's not something they have to share with the people in those communities anymore. And it also gives them the opportunity to, like we saw in this show, to establish like actual huge bases all over the place to help with this march that they had planned. And the more communities that they're able to like conquer and wipe out just gives them more and more resources, and it's basically like kind of conquering the entire continent so that they are the supreme single place on the planet that or on the continent that has all the resources, all the weapons and people, just so that they can, I guess, face what's coming from one single like location.
yeah, I mean, Jadis always used to say, "We're the light of the world." They always believed that they were the only ones who could solve the problem and who could do it. Where they're it's almost like a different version of what Negan says with the Savior. It's like we save
Yeah,
people. Like I'm the one who can save, but this is on a different level. Like Negan and the Saviors were more like Mad Max, where it was just a bunch of marauders who were just being just jerks and using just kind of like brute methods. But like the CR is directly remnants from the old government, and they had that civil war with the actual government forces in Pittsburgh, which is part of that lore that Beale says, and that's where
right.
like I again like it's so interesting to see and hear because and that's what I was hoping to get with the CRM. Like how did civilization first fall? Like how did the military fall? And I feel like this series did a good job at explaining how, in the
Yeah,
sense that they basically all turned on each other. Like what Okafor did. He was bombing the cities and he's like, screw it, I'm just going to bomb the people that are telling me to do this because like,
right.
why am I going to keep and then all there was just all this infighting between, and then it's like who's loyal to whom, and then that second civil war took place, and then the CR was basically what was left at the end of that, and they're almost kind of like the remnants of the government and they're remnants of the old US armed forces in a way. Um which again like it makes me that more disappointed that they're gone because I don't see how, like, we have the giant megahertz, but like I don't see how you go beyond their villainy. Like I don't, that's just the biggest thing I'm concerned about. Like once the Daryl and Carol and Negan and Maggie shows kind of run their course, I don't know what the end of either of those shows really is. Like if it's maybe to explore the Walker variants in France, and maybe there's something with Laurent's kind of miracle birth, being birthed to like a Walker mom. Like, I'm not sure from the stuff we got in the first season of that show. I'm not sure like what they're looking to expand there. Of course, everyone wants. I feel like it would be kind of foolish if the Daryl show didn't end with him reuniting with Rick. I mean, whenever he goes back to Commonwealth, Rick will be there. So it's like,
Yeah.
and that's, now we know that's what Carol was saying on the radio, that Rick came back.
Right.
Like, that's obviously who she was referencing. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like the end goal of the Daryl show, and in my opinion, I think, we obviously have season 2 coming up. I think there will be one more season after that, and that'll bring Daryl ultimately back home. And I think the best way for that show to end would just be him reuniting with Rick, and if they can get Andrew Lincoln back for, one final scene, and it kind of have it mirror like the final scene of The Ones Who Live. I think that would be really cool. And I feel like maybe he'll come home with information about these variants that are kind of spreading across Europe, and how that might relate to what's going on with the mega herds.
yeah. You
So I
get
feel
like a
like,
variant mega herd that's going like
yeah,
it's a pretty formidable threat. That's, I don't know. That would be tough to deal with, because you saw how the variant horde that attacked Commonwealth in the main show finale, how that put everyone's backs against the wall.
right. So I feel like they wouldn't have introduced that kind of threat so late in this franchise if they didn't have some sort of plan. So I feel like that might be the end goal, is kind of Daryl bringing home that information. As far as Dead City goes, I honestly have no clue what the end goal of that is. I feel like I feel like that's something they're probably going to want to go on for many seasons because of how popular Negan is. And it's kind of their chance to, like you said, do Saviors 2.0 with Negan, and kind of let him be back on top of the world. Especially with how the first season ended, I really feel like they're gonna kind of not make him like a villain again, but kind of let him be classic Negan again, and just kind of that super charismatic leader that kind of just runs the show. That kind of feels like the type of thing that they're going to do in the future of that show. And I'm not opposed to that, but I don't think that'll really have like a long term like effect on the whole universe like the variants will. I think that'll just kind of be like something kind of on the side that's just kind of fun, that they're
Yeah.
just doing fun basically.
Well, and I thought that all the shows, like before the CRM was defeated, I'm like, okay, like the information Daryl gets with the variants, like, and I thought that French nationalist government with that woman, their black uniforms, I thought they were CR. Like, I did. I thought they were like an off branch of their military, like some of the spies. And it's
Right.
just like that's what I'm, kind of wondering here. Like, why say all of this stuff about spies and the hordes and all this stuff with the briefing, just to kill, like, it's I thought this was all foreshadowing, but really it was just, kind of laying out information, and then like the group just ends. Like, and again,
Yeah.
it goes back to like what the future is. Like, was that set up, or were you just saying that to say it? Like,
Yeah.
you just set the
I
bar
th- I
so
kind of
high.
I kind of feel like in the sense it could be set up, but I also think on the flip side it might not. Where we got in episode 4, it was kind of when Rick's kind of still feeling like he needs to go back to the CRM, and Michonne's obviously not wanting him to. And she says to him, "We just need to get home and hold on to each other for as long as we can, and love on each other for as long as we can." I kind of like the idea of Rick getting all this information about, hey, things are about to get really bad in 14 years. Society that we have left might crumble because of the ongoing threat. And instead of facing that head on and kind of coming up with a solution for that, him kind of being like, this isn't my responsibility. I just want to spend the time that I have with my kids, with my family, and someone else can figure this out. I'm done. I've fought way too hard for too long. If we have 14 years, I'm going to make the most of those 14 years with my family. I kind of like that as the flip side of like, what are you gonna do? It's too big of a threat. It's just one man. I'm not gonna be the person that solves it.
Well, you know,
I kind
Rick's
of like
not backing down from a fight. Not now. Not everything he went through. He's like, well, because now he's strongest with his family and his group. You know, now he's
right.
with, you know, minus the characters we've lost in the time since Rick's been gone. Like, we have now, you know, the greater Commonwealth community with Ezekiel and some of the new people Rick hasn't met, like Mercer. And, like, you know, now there's this larger, he's back with the larger family, with the larger community. And it's kind of like, you know, I think that he said this in season 6, like, as long as it's all of it's all of us, we can do anything. And I don't doubt that between him, the Commonwealth, the new CR government's resources, I don't doubt that they'll, you know, be able to deal with that variant. I mean, the CR has helicopters, like, just you know, drop a few bombs from above. You know, I'm pretty sure the variants can. If you start getting variants that can jump like World War Z, maybe then you'll have problems. But I feel like the helicopters give you a little bit of a cushion.
And Rick and his people, I mean, they've had a lot of experience with like herds in the past, especially thinking back to season 6. I mean, I know that went wrong, but they had a decent plan for dealing with one of the
Oh
hordes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Michonne, even in this show, she, with the help of her little group, she was able to get through that horde that we saw in episode 2. So they have experience. They know how to handle themselves more so than probably like the people that live inside of the actual civic republic and haven't had the experience outside in the world. Rick and his group are probably a really good resource for handling situations like that, just because of how much time they've spent out in the world. um so it would be interesting to see that kind of alliance form with the Commonwealth and Alexandria and the CR if they wanted to explore that, now that it's not like a hidden city that is closed off, now that they could actually work together.
Yeah. I definitely think that, again, I see nuggets of information that the CRM was going in a different direction. Especially, like, I feel like the main show was supposed to talk more about it. Like, I still believe the whole Designation 2 thing was an agreement. Like, I bet Designation 2 was just a different version of what Jadis was doing, trading people in some type of neutrality pact. Like, I'm almost like, if someone, like, you know, said to Angela Kang, like, what was that? And I even think in an interview they kind of said, like, yeah, we were going to do more with it, but we didn't get another season. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have made up my mind that that was the CRM and they just weren't able to say it then. And that I kind of am fully under the impression that Lance Hornsby was a spy working for the CRM, and he was kind of doing what Jadis was doing back in the day, and getting people to be A's and B's for the community when he could, and using the resources that they gave him.
You know what would have been perfect if they could have had all those flashbacks in that final episode. If when Beale is talking about spies they've set up, if they
Mm-hmm.
flash to an image of Hornsby from season 11 or an
Right.
image of the French woman from the Daryl season 1, that would have basically just confirmed it for people. Like, oh, like, okay, like I knew all along, like, Lance was trying to, you know, form his own type of government, and it was, you know, going to be based off of something the CR could eventually conquer. Or, oh, I knew this woman was experimenting on variants in the name of the CRM. Like, it would have just confirmed, like, some things that the fans were theorizing, but a lot of people were like, no, the CRM was always just like a catalyst for Rick and Michonne to overcome because their love can conquer anything and they have to get home. And see, I think it's just two things were trying to be done, and I think one of them didn't get done. You know, like, a finishing Rick and Michonne story satisfactory. That happened, but the greater lore of the universe kind of, it was at the cost of the greater lore of the universe, either because AMC didn't want to renew the episodes or because Rick, you know, the actors were just done. Like, this has been a long time playing these characters, and I don't know if Andrew Lincoln wanted to get recommitted to do multiple seasons. Maybe that was on the table, and Andrew Lincoln's like, listen, I just want to conclude Rick's story.
Right.
And, like, I can't do what Norman Reedus is doing, signing on to season 2, 3 of the France series. Like, I can't do what he's doing. Like, tell my 6 episodes. And then I think that's what Gimple was like, oh, damn, all right, well, now I've got to conclude this. And I don't know if that created a problem or if maybe he always knew. Because like, people ask him, like, what's going on with the PPP card? And he's like, oh, like, I have a binder that talks about, like, he, like, references how he has all this info. I'm like, but, like, so what happened? Like, why didn't we talk about it? You know, like, that's what I'm wondering, you know? So.
It's like share this information. Then if you have it, give it to us.
He said in a Talking Dead episode, someone says, "Does the Commonwealth know the CRM?" And he's like, "Oh, we're gonna find out on this season or later on the answer to that question." We never found the answer out in all the seasons of The Walking Dead and the ones who live. It was highly implied that Designation 2 and Lance had connections, but we never, like, why never connect the dots? Like, I don't understand.
I don't know. I don't know what goes on in that man's head. He has all the answers, but at the same time, he doesn't have any answers.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm just like, dude, like, what's your master plan? Like, how do you just were celebrating the fact that this universe has survived the test of time, that, you know, you had a ratings drop, but then, like, you've come back massively. Like, I don't know what the specific, I'd love to get the specific ratings and numbers for what this series brought in, both via streaming and live. But, like, they hit it out of the park. And there's some great acting, and there's great, you know, action, and, you know, there is some, you know, unbelievable stuff with, you know, Rick and Michonne surviving that whole thing at the end with either the gas or the explosion. I don't know. Is that flag bomb-proof? Like, how did they survive? Yeah. I don't know. What, should they pull the flag over us? I'm like, do you know something about this flag we don't? Does that, like, right, stop explosives? Like, yeah. Like, I don't know. All right, so a question I have, you know, in reviewing The Ones Who Live, because we've spent a good portion of this video talking about future stuff and what's coming up, and a lot of those questions are unanswered. I'm going to stick with like, until, like, it's announced by Gimple or whatever that there is no more Walking Dead, I will keep going with the series. Like, obviously, Rick was the main draw for me, and I'm sad because it does feel like The Walking Dead ended a second time. Like, it ended the first time when season 11 wrapped up, and it basically ended a second time this past Sunday. And now it'll end a third time. It will end when everything is done. That's the third time for me. Like, when there's no more spin-offs, when there's no more tales or whatever else, it's just done. Like, they wrap it up in a bow, and that's it. You know, the Walking Dead universe is kind of done. But for now, there's some more content. But what was your favorite part? And I kind of talked about mine. What was your favorite part about the 6-episode limited run for Rick and Michonne's story? Did you have, like, a highlight of the 6-part series?
I think my favorite moment was Rick and Michonne's first reunion after the helicopter crash. And when we actually got to see, like, the full scene play out in episode 2, I think that was my favorite moment. I just loved how they kind of built up to it, and we knew it was coming, and we knew that was him on the ground, and it kind of was a colliding of their worlds after seeing where they've both been all this time. I think that was my favorite moment, but my favorite, like, thing overall about the series was getting to see just, like, how strong Rick and Michonne are as people individually, also together, but individually. Just seeing Michonne, how hard she fought to get back to Rick, and seeing how hard he was fighting to get home to Alexandria with, like you said, cutting off his arm, all of his different escape attempts, and then him kind of becoming resigned with the fact that he wasn't going to make it home and he had to stay there to keep them safe. We always knew, like, how far both of them were willing to go to keep their people safe, but this, I feel like, was a really good way to demonstrate that with the threat of the CRM. It had just, like, some of the coolest looks for both of those characters in the, like, CRM uniforms, and Michonne's cool, like, outfit that she got from her group. So I feel like it was you wouldn't expect to have, like, new elements of these long-standing characters and, like, learn more about them after this many years, but I feel like we really did get to see new sides of of the both of them that I wasn't really expecting, and didn't really know that we would get to kind of get into like Rick's backstory. We heard like the story about him growing up on a farm and hearing about his parents, and we got to learn little details about Michonne's past that we didn't know. So I thought that was really a cool thing that we probably wouldn't have gotten if they were necessarily on the main show until the end, because there were so many other characters. And I feel like that was a good idea to have with this limited focus on the two of them, that we got to learn more about two characters that we've known for so long, and just to see them in such a different situation kind of pushed to like their limits. I think that was my favorite part about it overall.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the point you made, how the limited run, and I think this is what Gimple is talking about. These limited, or not the limited episode, but the character focus. The fact that each of these spin offs really only focuses on two characters. It makes me think of Daryl seeing his great grandfather's gravestone in France, which is
Right.
just such
Yeah.
a cool, like, that's a backstory of Daryl. Like, we never really, like, we explored stuff with him and Merle back in the earlier seasons, but, and there was some of Daryl's abuse, and we got some of Daryl's backstory in those early episodes. But not like that's like a cool lore thing, and it go like you said, like we're learning about like what Rick's dad did with burning the crops and some of the lessons he learned from that, and like hearing his backstory was just it was significant. Um, One of my favorite scenes that I point out is the confrontation in episode 1 between Rick and Okafor when Rick goes into
Yeah.
Okafor's room. The acting by both actors there is just so superb. Just Rick's anger at the whole situation of the CRM, like his scene where he kind of like leans down and he's like, my wife is my choice, my daughter's my choice. Like, just it was a great, because both of those characters, and even though we got Okafor for only one episode, and that was another pet peeve of mine, there were so many great characters. It's like, and that's the thing, like, I have to think that Gimple is, like, kicking himself. Like, General Beale, Nat, Okafor. Even, I said this, I was making people laugh in my season 6 review, because I was pounding the table saying, I want more Esteban.
Yeah.
He was hilarious. Like, he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, man, you really did that shit? Like, he's freaking,
Yeah.
he's such a goofball. Like, he was the only, like, other than him and the guy at the stand who made the carvings on the iPhones, like, they were, like, some of the only citizens from the main CR in Philly that we really got to, like, get to know. And, like,
Right.
Esteban was just a way for Rick to try to make an escape attempt. But, like, he just had, like, he just had a quirkiness. And, like, they all had a personality. And obviously, like, Terry O'Quinn is such a celebrated actor from Lost. Him getting to play the big villain was like, oh, shit. Like, that's pretty cool. And for the scenes that he had, they were great. Like his giant monologue in the finale, I was like, that was so enjoyable. Like, I would have loved to
Yeah.
have seen more. Like, and same with Nat. Like, his character, and the fact that he was all very crafty, almost Fallout-esque with how he could craft explosives, and that's what ended up bringing the helicopter down. That helped Michonne reunite with Rick. So, but my favorite scene was between, because Okafor was just really grounded in what he believed. Like, he had been in the CRM for so long, and he's like, hey, listen, like, I gotta change some things, and the only way is for me to identify A's who are hiding amongst the B's. And he identifies Pearl Thorne and Rick as like, okay, you guys are really A's, but everyone thinks you're B's, but because I know you're A's, you're gonna help me change this from the inside. And there was
Right.
just, I feel like there was more potential to have more time with with Okafor. There was more time to have with Okafor. Imagine a scenario where Nat is also captured and brought into the CRM as a B. And he's
Yeah.
in consignment. Like, what would, instead of him just getting shot by a random soldier, which I'm pretty sure Michonne like slit his throat. Like, how did that guy still survive? I don't know, but. Like, there's just some scenarios where, because I remember I was showing this first episode to one of my close friends, one of my friends actually, for my fans, Jack, who did the reactions with me way back, he visited me. We live pretty far from each other now, but he visited. And he watched because he wasn't keeping up with The Walking Dead, and I'm like, oh dude, like the new series just came out, you should watch the first episode. So I showed him. His reaction was so funny when Okafor like blew up. He's like, what the fuck just happened? He's like, the guy just exploded. I'm just like, and I'm like, yeah, man, like I don't know, like that's something I'm kind of like, not like I don't understand why they're killing off some of these new characters so soon. But that was one of my favorite scenes. Obviously, the reunitings of Rick and Michonne for the first time, the ending scene. The other really great scene was when Rick was like, it was like the couples therapy episode in episode 4, but that scene
Yeah.
when Rick is talking about like he finally like reveals after like Michonne has to like rope it out of him why he's like wants to stay in the CRM, and he's like, like he just doesn't want to lose her, and because the trauma of Carl still haunts him, and it just like that like psychological stuff, like there was so many like, and I guess that was the benefit, right? Like it's like, okay, like we're not going to explore the CRM as much, like we did it a good amount, but we're not going to take it to the 100th degree, because we were focusing on the psychological nature of these characters. So many scenes, and my two favorite scenes were psychologically focused. Either that scene where Rick is going through this very deep, raw trauma therapy, or
Right.
even when I mean, like in that scene with Okafor, he literally, when Okafor aims the gun at him, Rick just takes the gun and he's just like almost stumbling into him. Like he's just kind of like, it's just like the way Andrew Lincoln acts where he's just defeated and he's just like, do it. Like, he's just like, I'm done. Like, I don't want him. I'm done with this. I don't want, like, I'm tired of being trapped here. And Okafor's like, nope, 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 nope. Like, it's so
Right.
that was what this did so well. Like the emotion of it, and that's why like every time I would come and do a review on my channel, and my fans who've watched my reviews know, I'd end it by being like, man, I'm just. It feels like I'm just getting started. I'm just starting to really enjoy. I'm like, this is the most I've enjoyed The Walking Dead in years.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
it's just done. Like it came and went so quickly. like
Exactly.
I think 8. And I don't know if you agree with me. I think a half season 8 episode run would have been better. I feel like even if you still wanted to conclude the CRM the way you did it, I feel like those extra 2 episodes you could have given any of the characters that only got this one season. Whether it's Okafor, Nat, or Thorn, or Beale, you could have given any of those characters more exploration, because episode 5 was very much the Jadis episode. Like that
Right.
episode sent, because Gabriel came back to complement her character. And then
Yeah.
like, Jadis is kind of has almost a redemptive end. Like that episode 5, as much as it was the reunion of Rick and Michonne on the road, like post trauma, like it was also Jadis trying to come to who she's gonna be, seeing Rick and Michonne happy, realizing she could have had that with Gabriel, but she's made choices to join the CRM. You could have done that with more characters. You could have given us more to Beale. Like instead of just dumping all this information about Beale, like we could have had more context to him. And what about Beale's son, Mason, who we meet in the spinoff? Like, what's gonna happen to him? Is he gonna be pissed that his dad and his whole battalion died, or that's potentially something that's left over they could explore.
Yeah, I think 8 episodes would have been perfect for this show specifically. I know they like to do the 6 episode first season for a lot of their shows, but I think 8 episodes, which is kind of with the original show, we would get like 8 episode arcs for the seasons. It would be 8 episodes in the first half, 8 episodes in the second half, and that would be kind of its own contained story. I think that would have been perfect to give more time to flesh out these side characters, and to actually like resolve this stuff with the CRM, to actually show Rick and Michonne actually getting home and having a couple, like some actual time with the kids. I would have liked to see like a little bit more with the kids, and maybe if they had time and were able to get some of the other actors back to kind of have them reunite with them also. I feel like 8 episodes would have been like the perfect sweet spot amount of time, because like you said, it was kind of because they only had 6 episodes and they had so much to do, they had certain characters they really had to wrap up. They had to give Jadis that episode to kind of explain her character and then give her her send off, give her a moment of redemption, give her that kind of conclusion with Rick and Michonne. Um, and I think that was well done. But I would have liked to see that with Beale, with Okafor, with Nat, and with Thorne, because those exits felt really abrupt. They did feel very Walking Dead, where I like the unpredictability of literally anyone can die. It's not like a situation where people are getting out of like every single dangerous situation. They just come out okay. We see people dying constantly in this show, and I like that kind of upped the stakes. Obviously, Rick and Michonne have their plot armor, but this was a very, I mean, it was pretty much everyone but Rick and Michonne died. Everyone that we met pretty much died except for a few of the really small characters. But I feel like I would have loved to have like 2 or 3 episodes with Okafor, 2 or 3 episodes with Nat. Um, Beale was billed as this main villain of the series, but he was only in 3 episodes. I feel like it would have been better to have him more fleshed out across 8 episodes. I think they could have done that a little bit better. Same with even Thorne. She was only in 3 episodes.
Yeah, my man
like
Esteban. More
yeah,
episodes with Esteban. Come on.
we should have gotten a scene at the end with Esteban, with Rick reuniting with him, and kind of letting him know that things are going to be okay for his community now. And
if I ever do a cameo for that actor, I'm gonna say I want you to do the scene where he's like telling him where the water drainage pipe is.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be like, hey, can you do that but with like the finale? I
Yeah.
sure as shit wouldn't tell you to sit in a meeting with Beale and then throw a knife at him and then turn his ass into a zombie. And I sure as shit wouldn't tell you to plant explosives behind like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just ask him to do that. Just the way he delivered that was just
that actor was great. I wish they would have had him. I mean, it didn't really work because the story was so separate from the main city that it wouldn't have worked. But I think instead of having that narration at the end with like the announcer telling us what happened, I would have rather they showed it to us, showed us the changes happening in the Civic Republic. And I mean, Esteban mentioned that his girlfriend was a journalist. It would have been cool seeing Rick and Michonne give the girlfriend the information about what happened and her kind of being the one to expose it. But they obviously didn't have time for that because it had to end.
Well, they have a whole council. Like, who's on the council? Like, I remember asking in my episode 6 video, I was like, who's this government? We never meet the government. There are a couple of newspapers in and this brings context where apparently after 10 years, the CR was supposed to assume control over the military. Mm-hmm. And then this is where Beale comes in, where Beale basically like, all right, we have this window of time to become so powerful they can't take us over. How do we do that, right? Like was the whole plot. And maybe this is something that World Beyond needed to do more. Like maybe we needed to see more of the CR civilization, what was going on inside inside Philly, because I always thought they weren't showing us that because that was going to be the main focus of where Rick was going to be. I'm like, okay, we're not seeing it, but for a reason, but we didn't get like too much of it, like it was bizarre. Like it was just kind of bizarre. And like, again, like there were 2 purposes here, and one was more supreme in the fact that it was Rick and Michonne getting home, their love, and it's like they kept billing it as a love story. It's like, yeah, but within this love story, you've also created the biggest threat this show has ever seen, and you're making it so that like this is essentially like, and it's funny, some interviewers would say this to Gimple, like, oh, you've created like an Avengers Endgame where like everyone's got to team up against the CRM, and he's probably thinking like, yeah, that would have been fun, but that's not like that's not, we didn't do that. I'm like, but like I'm just like, But why? Like, I always thought that was what this was building up to. And I remember seeing people who were spinning crazy theories about how this season was going to end. Like, Michonne was going to die, or
Yeah,
Rick and Michonne get away, but Beale, like, bombs Alexandria. But, like, obviously Judith and RJ are at the Commonwealth because Jadis didn't know about Commonwealth at the time. Like,
right.
there were all these theories that it was going to end in this crazy cliffhanger, and then, like, the other spin offs were going to lead us into what was next. And I'm like, I was certain that that was going to happen. But then, like, I start thinking, I'm like, limited run. They want to tell their stories. There's no commitment to a season two. Like, the only thing I was thinking was Gimple possibly being like, yeah, there's going to be like another series where everyone comes back together. I'm like, okay, that's going to be like the finale of everything. But I don't think they can do that now. There's not enough. There's not enough content on the bone, at least in my opinion. You know?
Yeah, and I think it was kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where maybe maybe when the movies were still a thing before it got changed into a limited series, maybe that would have happened because, things just kept getting pushed back. We had to end up waiting so long. I think maybe if the movies had come out, it would have been different and maybe that would have led into something bigger with the CRM. But it feels like after they all had to wait so long, we had to wait so long, it kind of felt like, oh, you know what, let's just conclude this story of Rick and Michonne because Andy Lincoln's been tired of this for he's been wanting to wrap it up for a long time. Denai has been wanting to wrap it up, and the fans want closure to their story. So let's just do these 6 episodes, wrap it up, and that be the end of it. I feel like the movies, I would love to know like what the original plan for the movies was going to be because I remember Gimple saying something along the lines of it being different than what it ended up being now, obviously because it's a different medium.
I would love to know how it was meant to be different, and I mean, if each movie's going to be 2.5 hours, I mean, and then what was the total runtime for the limited series? Like 6 hours, so six divided, like you almost reached the time the three movies is, right? Like two and a half,
Mm-hmm.
two. That's that basically sort of brings you around the same. 6 episodes kind of is the same runtime as
Yeah.
three movies, like a little, maybe minus plus some minutes, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe like they were supposed to film this and do this earlier, and then COVID happened, and then Lincoln's like, I can't guarantee anything beyond, and same with Denai Guerrero. Like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just like I don't know. Like, it's just the future direction just really confuses me because I'm not sure if Gimple's like, hey, like this is earning us ratings and money. Do you want to be on for the future of this? Like, they're like, no, like we've been in this universe for a long time. Like, okay, fair enough. Like, it's just a lot of things to juggle, I guess. Like, I just don't know. It's just very confusing. Like, again, I'll ride out the two remaining spin-offs we have, but like, I guess this is one of our wrap up questions here. Like, what other, and you alluded to this earlier, other than future tales of the only thing I can think of that they can add on new is future Tales of the Walking Dead episodes where it's a bunch of new characters that are just like one off scenarios, but then maybe we get like a cool backstory for like, I don't know, Lance Hornsby maybe. I mean, because that actor did such a freaking great job of that character. So maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
just like a one-off character who's like a villain or something, and we see them from like an earlier time, and it's like, oh, okay, that's how this connects to this. Like, I'd love to see like a backstory Commonwealth, like early days Commonwealth. Like, that would be cool. Like,
Right.
other than those types of things for Tales, and then the final seasons of Daryl and then the Negan show, like, what else do you really think they can do to continue this now that the biggest threat is seemingly gone?
Yeah, I think, and it's kind of it's I see both sides of it because Robert Kirkman's kind of original vision for the comic books, even though that ended, his vision for that was the zombie story that never ends, that just kind of lives on forever. And even though that did end, as the reader, you're kind of left with the mental like image that, hey, even though this is over, I know that these characters' stories are continuing. and they're living on. And it was kind of that ending too with the main show where even though it's ending, we know that they're going to continue on, they're going to live their lives. So I kind of think moving forward the best option would be kind of like you said, just kind of a mix of new stuff, but if they can get older actors back to kind of either do like prequel type stories where we see, I would love something like showing different characters at the beginning of the apocalypse, like characters that we didn't see early on, we didn't see at the beginning, seeing what they were doing on that those first days of the apocalypse. Like what was Lance Hornsby doing when the world fell apart? What was Mercer doing when the world fell apart? I think that would be really cool for Tales, because we kind of got that in the Dixon show with the character of Isabel. We got to see pretty much a whole episode of her during the initial outbreak in Paris, and that was really
That
cool.
video has a lot of hits of France falling apart.
Yeah,
It's like that stuff interests people, like, because it's back to what
yeah.
fear people like with fear. It's like, and that was what I hoped, like, the CRM could have done that because, like, they were the remnants of those soldiers, so you could have, all the stuff Beale talks about, the second, give me a show of the second Civil War, Pittsburgh versus Philly, and I will watch it. Like,
Yeah.
like, just give it to me, and I will watch that. Like,
Exactly. Or even like I would love to see like a limited thing about maybe someone that's in the community in Omaha when it's attacked and they make it out. They're like the sole survivor and they have to be on the run because they're being chased. Like even though that would be technically in the past, I think that would be such a cool story kind of building on an event that we know happened. We didn't really see much beyond like a quick little scene.
yeah, I guess the kids are kind of that because they escaped,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
they sort of did that with the kids, and that's why I'm grateful that we got World Beyond because it's the
Yeah.
closest thing to like, hey, you guys wanted a whole season. Like basically anyone who complains about there not being enough CRM in these 6 episodes, it's like, well, we did dedicate 2 seasons to them. Here it is. Like with the kids, like you got them growing up in Omaha. You got some zombie experimentation stuff. Jadis comes back. There's
Yeah.
a whole bunch CRM stuff there.
The problems that that show had aside, it did do a really good job of like world building and showing like before we saw the CRM. I mean, that was like our first time seeing them really up close, and we got to see, especially in season two, just like how ruthless they were. Aside from what they did to Omaha, we got to see them at that research facility. We got to see like how crazy Jadis had become and how they had an alliance with that community that was like the old town, how they had like an alliance with them and they would trade supplies with them, but they knew that that community wasn't really a threat, so they kind of just let them exist and didn't really bother them. So
Mm-hmm.
we got some really good information from World Beyond, and that's I'll always defend that show because I thought it was at least they were trying something new.
Second
It was,
season especially was
yeah,
so because like Jadis was basically like the villain, and I'm like, it was just
yeah,
gripping to like see the inner workings of how the CRA, because season 1 was very much like the kids. It was like Stranger Things meets The Walking Dead.
yeah,
It was just the
yeah.
kids traversing through. You had some scenes with the lieutenant. I think Kublik was her name.
Hmm.
Like there were some scenes because she has a newspaper article that talks about like the 10-year plan for the CR
Yeah,
to take over the CRM. So there were some like her mental. I love the scene when she was like coming to grips with the fact that she led that annihilation of Omaha. Like you get to
right.
dive into the psychology of that.
Yeah.
Um,
And that was our first time seeing inside the Civic Republic. We see her in her apartment in the community
mhm.
in Philadelphia, and we get like little bits of information. I remember she's telling the soldier like, this is what we're fighting for. This community. We have 200,000 people here. We have a council. We have agriculture. We have shops and civilization, and this is what we're fighting
Yeah.
for.
But it comes down to the budget again because this is the same problem that I had with Commonwealth. Did I ever get the sense that it was a 50,000 group civilization? No. Cuz there were
No.
like 3, it was like the town square, the train yard, and then like a few places Eugene went. Like
Right.
and then never felt like you know, and I'm pretty sure they just reused like pieces of Terminus or something to freaking film where Commonwealth was, and it never felt like the video, the VCR video that Lance shows, where it's like there's a concert, and in the comics there's a football game in a stadium. Like it's like big, and so like it's supposed to be that same scale, but like they just don't have the budget to show that, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the same thing with the CRM, like, you know, you could see the Philly CR and go into that, but like you just don't have that kind of time, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I guess that Zuma's yelling at me about the time thing again, so I guess that brings us to the end of our discussion here. It was a longer video than we've made in the past, but I think it was warranted just because, you know,
yeah,
this is, like we said, a second ending to this series, and the first one didn't feel like an ending to me, because they even showed like Rick and Michonne, and that music was, it was funny. Everything at the end loops into the ones who live, because the last line of The Walking Dead from Judith is "We're the ones who live." What's the name of the series? And even Rick says it as that music, the main theme of this show, plays in his third escape attempt. All of that was like directly linking. And I remember someone saying, like, if you watch The Walking Dead seasons 1 till 11, The Ones Who Live is basically season 12. Like, you can't watch, like, if I'm gonna tell someone, hey, let's binge watch The Walking Dead together, when we finish season 11, I'm like, oh no, there's 6 more episodes. Like, that's, like, you can't finish it off. And I'm sure someone would be like, whoa, what the heck, Rick putting his hands up as a copter comes down? Like, what happens there? It's like, yeah, well, there's 6 more we gotta watch, like, you know. So
it's kind of like an epilogue too. Like it's the end of the main story, but this is kind of the closing chapter of our 2 like central characters with Rick and Michonne. Like this is the thing that wraps up their story. Everything else was wrapped up for the most part in the finale of season 11, and then this is the thing to close it all. So you can kind of have a complete experience there for the most part.
Yep. Yeah, so this very much feels like a conclusion. I enjoyed thoroughly start to finish. I know I was disappointed about the additional world building stuff, but, you know, I think I've come a little more to terms with it just because I know Andrew Lincoln especially has been in this universe for so long, and I'm just glad his story had a good ending, because for those of us who know, the comic ending for Rick is horrible.
Yeah.
Like freaking stupid Sebastian just kicking the door. And again, like, this is, Kirkman's different than Gimple. Kirkman loves the shock value stuff. Like, you don't think, basically someone says, I dare you to kill Rick this way. He's like, okay. And he just does it. Yeah. It's like, it's like but it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Right? No. It's that classic, does shock value make for a good ending? It's like, no, the answer is no.
And something like this, where we've invested so much time, it has to have somewhat of a happy ending. Like, it just has to. Like, Rick, after everything he's been through, deserves to have a happy ending. It doesn't make sense to give him.
It's such a juxtaposition from his end in the comics. And I saw someone write this comment where technically Mason Beale could, I don't know, what if he shows up? What if there's like what if there's like an evil post-credit scene where, like, you know, Rick reunites with his family, they're all living happily ever after, he's asleep in his room, and then Mason Beale comes in and is like, you killed my dad, and then he shoots Rick and turns him into a walker, and then Judith has to put him down, and it's the worst ending ever. Oh
God.
I don't want to give AMC any ideas here, but like, that is a question, like, of the lingering CRM stuff. Like, there is still the kid Mason. Like, you know, is there anything there? The fact that, you know, like, he's, you know, the son of this, you know, giant warlord who is controlling this group. Maybe there's nothing there, but, like, I don't know. Like, I'd be curious. I'm sure that actor's getting his DMs blown up right now. Like, the same thing happened to Wade. The savior that we never saw his face in season 6. Yeah, I remember reaching out to him too. I was like, were you ever supposed to come back for The Walking Dead? And he's like, I can't say that, but people have blown up my inbox asking about this. And it's just like, yeah, when you leave, same thing with Corey Hawkins, never really coming back, you know? Although I'm pretty sure he was just regarded as an A and was experimented on, and that was it. Like in terms of
Yeah.
Heath, like that's what happened to Heath. Like they said he
Yeah.
was an A. He got turned into a walker in the zombie labs. They should have at least had a shot of him, like CGI him in the world
Yeah.
beyond. Like, then you
Yeah.
can be like, oh, there's Heath,
Stop asking about it. There he is. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been easy because Angela Kang already confirmed that Jadis captured him and sold him to the CRM. Like that, like, and the
Right.
fact that she's driving his RV in
Mm-hmm.
episode 5 already confirms that. So,
Right. Yeah.
but there are some lingering things. Like, I don't know, the Mason Beale thing could possibly come up. But no, Rick's ending, I'm happy he got, like, usually it's like, oh, happily ever after. It's like, oh, so cliche. But he got
Yeah.
a good ending. Like, he deserved it. That's the thing. Like, he went through just such dark psychological trauma to see him come out the other end of Victor. Like, it's so much. Like, I mean, listen, the series is called The Ones Who Live. And I
Yeah.
don't know if people realize The Ones Who Live is the antithesis of The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead, it's the dead, but this is The Ones Who Live. It's the antithesis of that. And it's
Yeah.
basically saying, like, the whole show was meant to prove that these are people who overcome, who survive. Like, this, despite the world being dead, like, these people live, but they live fulfilled. It's not just them living,
Yeah.
I love the message. I could go on, in other videos probably about the messages, and I probably will, for fans wondering, like, I probably will do a couple more breakdowns of just some of the messages I really like in this show that are really hammered in these final 6 episodes. They really dive deep into it from all of the psychology we get between Rick and Michonne. But yeah, there's a potential for more. There is. But as far as right now, it seems like things are done, but I'll ride out, looking at the remaining episodes. So, in the last 3 minutes here, what else? What are your kind of closing statements?
Yeah. I'm locked in till the end. I've always said that if I'm an old man and I'm watching a show about the last remaining walker that's stumbling through the apocalypse, I'll be there. It's my favorite franchise, so I'm gonna ride it out to the end, whatever that may be, the very end. So I'm excited for what's to come. I don't know what. I'm glad we're getting a little bit of a break. I'm glad we're not jumping right into the next thing, because that was kind of a stressful and emotional 6 weeks with Rick and Michonne. But The Walking Dead doesn't die. It's gonna keep going in one way or another, and I'm here for it.
Yeah,
So,
more. I'll at the very least do more discussions and topics about the remaining spin-offs, and there's a potential I could become a walker because I only live 30 minutes of where season 2 of Dead City is being filmed, and I actually signed the form to be an extra on it because they reached out to people in the local towns and they're like, you can do
that's
this.
awesome.
So I haven't been called back, but I did. I sent photos. I sent all this stuff, and I'm like, I would love that. Would be a bucket list item. I don't know if Lauren Cohan and Jeffrey D. Morgan would be there, but I could freaking meet them. Who knows? But
Yeah, that's awesome.
We'll see. We'll see. I haven't gotten called back, but we'll see. So
You'll have to keep an eye on that.
I will definitely tell the fans on the channel and yourself if there is
Yeah.
any news in that department. So
Yeah, I think they're filming through the end of July, so it'll be a couple of months of filming. So who knows what we'll get to see.
Yeah. So, all right, sir. Thank you for joining me for this with the remaining time we have, and it was a great series. It was memorable. There's more questions to be answered, but for a lot of the questions we had, it concluded them. It concluded these characters, gave them a great end to their story, and we still have some more content, and we'll see what all we can do is wait and see, whether it's an announcement from Gimple or something else, like what's to come. Like I'll wait from the mouth of the talking head to give it to us. So, all right. That's it, guys. Thanks, and see you for more content in the future.